I have Anna sitting over there. Very seldom do I introduce her when she's standing right next to me. But Anna is a personal friend, but also a business partner. She is an executive coach. She's a speaker. She's a presenter. She's also an author of 2 books. She runs her own company, Impact Leadership Solutions. Then on top of that, she's a wife, a mother, and she serves on the board of Women's Beam Project with me. So I can tell you she is a very, thank you. More applause now. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to her so that she can introduce our esteemed panelists that I know we're all excited to hear about, especially in these days and times to talk about resiliency.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me without the microphone? Everybody can hear me back there? Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to give this to Rich then. No? Sorry. Well, first of all, you've had 2 other people like that. Is that better? Okay. That helps, huh? My husband will be so happy at home because I'm going to have no voice when this is over. He's going to be like, yes. I'll be the 3rd person to welcome everyone here today. It's so wonderful to see many familiar faces. So it's great to have you guys back. The new people, welcome. It's an amazing, not only an amazing event, but the networking and the people we meet are wonderful. We have people representing almost every industry out there in the audience. So it's important, very important, to get to know people outside of your comfort zone. Really meet people because we all share a lot of the same challenges. Everybody is here today because you're facing some sort of resiliency, no matter what your industry. So our panelists can definitely speak to that. The first person I want to introduce is Rich Fromer. And it's Rich. Can you give him a hand? Yay, Rich! Yay, Rich! Yay! Rich is the current CEO of Great Western Operating Company. And he'll explain why in a little bit why I'm calling it the operating company. Rich has, got 35 years of experience in the oil and gas business. And it's amazing because he was the most recent chair of the Colorado Oil and Gas Association. So he helped the whole industry through some really rough times. So he's going to talk about that. He was sharing with me that a lot of these on the wall, I think you said 3? At least 3 he has worked with and worked for. As a matter of fact, right there, the HS Resources, he helped bring them to Colorado, Wyoming, and there's another one too. Louisiana. So he has extensive experience with that. He's done so much. He was a senior vice president of the Rocky Mountain Division at Sampson Resources Company. Is that up here too? Would you like to point? Oh, I missed that one. All right. Well, so Rich will be helping us today learn all about resiliency. And then let's talk about Bobby. So Bobby McPherson, she is, you guys ready for this? The Chief Human Resources Officer for the the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, pretty cool. The last 15 years, she's served as an HR executive level, helping many companies through change and transition. And in that includes, you worked at, I should know this off the top of my head, I'm so sorry, Two Roads Hospitality before it was acquired by Hyatt. She also worked in ski resort industry, boarding school industry, and I know I'm missing one other one. And education, of course, and education. So really happy to hear Bobby today. And our last panelist, a lot of you have probably seen her. She does a lot of speaking gigs around the Denver area in Colorado. Christine Bonero, I almost rolled my R's, I'm sorry. That's all right, I almost rolled my R's. My mom's from Jersey. She thinks my name is Anna, not Anna. But nobody call me Anna unless you're from Jersey. Otherwise, no way. Christine is the current CEO of United High Mile Way. Before that, she was Mile High United Way. Thank you. Resiliency. Close enough. Thank you. Before that, she was CEO of the American Red Cross Mile High chapter. And this I have to look at my notes for because I can't remember all of these. She is on the board of directors. And I should actually have anybody raise their hand if you're involved in these organizations. So Health One, anybody in the medical business here, medical field? I know we've got a few of you. Nobody, Patty, you can raise your hand. Patty can raise her hand. Patty's representing. National Civic League. Any Civic Leaguers? No. Community Wealth Partners. Colorado Society of CPA, who's representing right here. Yay. City Year Denver, and she's also on the board of EPIC. If that wasn't epic enough, bad joke, she has lots of awards, including 9 News Leader of the Year. We have 9 News represented right here. She won the Community Leader Award by Goodwill Industries. Girl Scouts of America, 100 Distinguished Alumni. Love those cookies. My pants used to fit until the Girl Scout season comes along. And the 25 Most Powerful Women by the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce. Pretty good, huh? Yep, really good. And again, if you think of all these industries she's touched as well, there's so much resilience that's involved in every one. I want to open it up by having each of you tell us your own personal story of resiliency. And just kind of to set the stage, when we talk about resiliency, what we mean is being able to handle and overcome trauma, tragedy, significant stress, which, by the way, every single one of us in here, if you're in the working world, lots of stress. Every time you look at your phone, it's stress. Every time you walk in the office, it's stress. So that being said, it's laying the foundation by what we mean by resiliency. Let's go ahead and have Bobby. Would you mind telling us your story?
Sure, Anna, thank you. I'd be happy to share a little bit about, sorry.
Here, I'll turn mine off.
Right up? Is it? Oh, like right up. Thank you. Okay, good. So, as Anna said, I have had a long career, over 30 years, as in the HR profession. So, I'm currently the Chief People Officer for, as she said, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And one of the things, since 2011, I seem to have been plagued with thinking I was moving to an organization to be a part of something exciting that I could see myself working at for a very long time. And in the last 3 cases, except for the one I'm at now, within 5 to 6 months, I found out that the organization was being sold. So talk about getting some experience with resiliency. So, it's a frustrating thing when you join an organization you want to work for, because you're joining because the team is there and the culture and the environment. And then, either a new CEO comes in, or they're selling off all the ski resorts, or they have just decided that they can't pass up the marketplace. And so that has been my story since 2011. And, you can't, from a resiliency standpoint, you can't let it get you down, because you also then, in a leadership role, have to sort of be the rock, help all of the employees who are transitioning and unexpectedly. I built teams at some of these places where I went to work. I recruited my network, people in my network. I convinced them to leave a great job that they had to come and work with me and be part of something great, only then to find out unexpectedly that the company was being sold. So, part of the reason that I decided to take the role at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, you may not all realize this, but the only thing that can take away our organization's rights to run the Olympics would be an act of Congress. So, Congress, job security. I think they're a little bit busy with a few other things right now, so I feel very confident that I might actually make it to that 5-year mark.
Go ahead. Thank you, and I want to also say thank you to Amy and Anna for the opportunity to be here. And before I do any further, could we also just acknowledge the music was amazing when we walked in. So thank you very, very much. I have some colleagues and team members that do our events. He's really good, Kayla. So thank you. Thank you all. And I am Christine Bonero and have the honor and privilege of serving as the president and CEO of Mile High United Way, which is a position I have been fortunate enough to hold for the past 10 years, which is hard to believe because before that it would look like I couldn't hold a job. With truly, with that, I have to tell you, I'm a Colorado girl. I love being in the DAC because I had my 5th birthday party at the bowling alley in the DAC here. So, and I still have my dad, who is celebrating his 90th birthday next month. I still have his original membership card here. So I love that we're in the DAC. This is a very special place. But all kidding aside, if somebody had told me when I was a little girl that I would be the CEO of a really amazing legacy organization called the United Way, I would have laughed and said, not at all. My journey started out as I wanted to be a teacher. And so that truly was how I started my journey. I was a teacher. My first job was to work with adjudicated young people in a private facility. And it's where I got my first glimpse of what resiliency looks like and what it doesn't look like, and how much of a role a community plays in wrapping their arms around kids, around families, and the responsibility that we all have. So I began that journey where I also began to understand the power of systems and what role systems can play. So I found myself in working in an employer-supported child care center to understand how we support women and how we support children. And then I got a glimpse of that public policy can actually change a family's life. And so I was incredibly fortunate enough to begin doing some public policy work. Along the way, I did take a little detour, which is why, and this is the only job that I held that my father loved, because he understood what it was, sort of. So I went to work for Target stores. And at least he knew what Target was. I went to work for their corporate foundation. And again, it was the role of understanding what corporations play in making communities strong and resilient. It was the best lesson I could have ever gotten because I learned that in order for a company to do good, a company has to do well first. So we have to have our businesses strong so that they can invest back. And then I found myself in Washington, D.C. It was a privilege. It was one of those, I felt a lot like Forrest Gump because I ended up working for President Clinton and then for President Bush. And it was just, again, one of those being in the right place at the right time. And then I had a chance, I was in DC, and again, when you want to talk about the resiliency, it's probably the day I'm the most proud of, was I was in the White House on September 11th on that day. And it's not about September 11th I talk about, I want to talk about September 12th, because that is the day the entire country and the entire city got back on its feet and said, here's who we are as a country, and that's what resiliency is really all about. And then I had the chance to come home to Colorado to run the American Red Cross, and then the United Way, which again has been a privilege because I am surrounded by the most amazing team of people working with back to my roots, community and family members that sometimes we have left behind. And then just to throw in a little about resiliency, because I told you, Anna, I would do that, I learned a whole new definition that has nothing to do with me, but rather the people you surround yourself by. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and that's where you learn who you are, but more importantly, what a community is. I will tell you, I'm sitting up here absolutely cancer-free, as healthy as can be, has everything to do with a community. But you take these paths and these journeys that you don't ever expect. So,
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Wow. That's a tough act to follow. But, I'm Rich Fromer, and I'll tell you a little bit about my history. You know, I grew up back east, and when I graduated a university upstate New York with a degree in earth science and geology, I really did, like many graduates, didn't know what I was going to do with that. So I decided to move to Colorado and become a ski bum. So that's what I did. But I made the mistake of coming out here in the springtime, and the guys at the ski area said, come back next November. So I had to find a real job. And I found a job working as a geologist for the company's not up here, but it was CIG Exploration, Colorado Interstate Gas. It's merged into many other companies. That was my first exposure to the oil and gas business. And as a young exploration geologist, my very first prospect was a discovery. So I got the bug as an oil finder, and it never left me. But like many of you know, our industry, as Susan mentioned, is made up of boom and bust cycles. So while I'm living high and got a great job and newly married and a brand new mortgage and a new child on the way, 1986 comes, and those of you who might have been around then, the industry went into a complete collapse. And I lost my job. And I didn't see it coming. I just really was blindsided by that. And so I grabbed a six-pack of beer and went out to the dam at Chatfield Reservoir and contemplated my future. And I said, I'm not going to find myself in that position again. So I re-educated myself and essentially got an MBA and learned about the business side of oil and gas, and eventually found myself doing many different things, entrepreneur, put a snow plow on the front of my Jeep, and I had to do everything to make that mortgage payment and that young child who was coming on the way. So I think that was really my first true test of resiliency. I eventually got back in the industry, moved to Montana. That company over there with the red sign, Cenex Petroleum, had been in business for about 100 years. And I said, honey, we're moving to Montana. And my wife was from Brooklyn, so Brooklyn to Billings was a long trip. But she showed quite a bit of resiliency moving up there with me. And I said, honey, we can go to work for this company, and it's been around for 100 years. We'll be able to stay here forever. 3 years later, they sold my division, and I was out of a job. I went to work for another company, came back to Denver and worked for that HS Resources company. And 3 years later, they were sold, and I was out of another job. So, but at least I was seeing these things coming, and I was much better prepared every time. Eventually, from HS, I went to Samson Resources, started a 3-man office. And when we sold it in 2011 for $7.2 billion, we had grown to quite a big company. And so I was pretty much done, ready to retire, when I got a phone call from the owner of Great Western saying, I've got this little oil company. Would you consider, Rich, coming joining me? And I said, well, I'll take a look. And actually, they owned assets right near where we used to work at HS Resources, right here in the Northeast in the Wattenberg field. And that was 7 years ago. We were making 1,000 barrels of oil a day then, and now we're about 60,000. So we've grown quite a bit from 10 employees to about 170. So it's been a fun ride. But in that interim period, I also was diagnosed with cancer about 5 years ago, prostate cancer. And I can tell you today that I'm cancer-free.
Yeah, nice. But I have a really important question. Were you ever able to be a ski bum?
That's a good question. So yes, I did become a part-time ski bum, worked
Love
at
it.
Copper Mountain as a ski instructor on the weekends, ran the Copper Chopper group for about 4 years. And
Nice.
when I lived in Montana, I actually worked on the National Ski Patrol at Red Lodge Mountain.
That is really cool. Good. You lived the dream. Absolutely lived the dream.
Yeah, thank you.
So now I want to talk about the attributes and behaviors of your leaders that are resilient. So in companies, how do you know if a leader truly shows resiliency? Bobby, would you mind starting us off?
Resiliency can show up in many different ways. And one of the things, there's a couple things that I think that are the hallmarks of people who truly can weather the storm. And it's really the folks and the people that I admire that set boundaries and have a certain amount of balance in their life. Without that, it's much harder to weather tough times, stressful situations, whether they be short-term or long-term. And I think having this focus on well-being and wellness. So all of those concepts come together for me. One of the things that we have found, we at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee are going through quite a bit of change and transformation, trying to restore and rebuild the trust with our athletes, with the sport governing bodies that we support and serve. And this whole concept of well-being is really important. We actually recently revised our mission statement with the input of athletes and others within the Olympic movement to include a focus on well-being. And our mission at the USOPC is to empower Team USA athletes to achieve competitive excellence and well-being. And that well-being is really, really important to us. And it's not just achievable by saying it and focusing it on those we serve. One of the things we've realized through doing some of our own culture assessment internally is that we need to focus on our own well-being. It's that concept of you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you help the child sitting next to you. And what our leadership, our previous leadership didn't realize is the sense of well-being and having boundaries within our organization of about 800 team members just didn't exist. So we've been very deliberate about, there are many other things that you can focus on to build resiliency, but we think this concept of having a focus on well-being and care and concern and compassion is really important. So we're doing a number of things to try to bring that into the organization so that we can be at our best to serve those that we have to serve so they can be at their best. So.
Good, thank you. Rich, would you mind telling us about attributes you look for?
So I think in order to have a resilient group of people around you, you need to have a thought that the organization is made up of good people. So it starts with just having a surrounding of good people around you. And I've got a bunch of them sitting in that row right now. You know, in our business, we've been challenged for a long time in the industry that we provide, you know, so much good to the general public with. We need those good people to be deliverers of messages out there. But one of the characteristics is they have to be agile. I think it's critical that you be agile in your job because you're going to be constantly bombarded with changes that will force you to react. And I think a certain measure of patience is really critical too. You will get through it if you don't overreact sometimes and just are patient enough to get through whatever crisis it is you're dealing with.
So when you talk about patience, I'm totally throwing a curveball at you. Sorry. But you probably expect that, don't you?
I'm used to it from you.
Pretty much. When you talk about people needing patience, what about people that are not at your level? What if they are, we're talking about more of the director level. What tips can you give them for them to have patience?
You mean more the staff level?
Yeah, well, director and below. So we're
Director
talking about
below,
not your VPs, but director and below.
More the working group.
The people that really do the work, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, exactly. We set the theme, but they're actually carrying it out. But I think it's making sure they have all the tools at their disposal, and also making sure that, you know, us as leaders, we walk the walk, and we become the role models, so that they can emulate what they see from the higher ups.
Good. Those of you that work with Rich, do you think he walks the walk? Yeah. Totally put him in the spot, but I knew what the answer was, I promise.
Drinks are on me.
That was wonderful. Thank you. And most people don't realize this, but United Way is a $30 million business. $30 million. And what's really cool about it is that it actually started in Denver 125 years ago. Pretty amazing. So, Christine, I mean, it's changed a lot. How has United Way had to change their business model? How have they had to be resilient?
So thank you for the history. We take great pride that the entire United Way movement, which is now a worldwide movement, started right here in Denver, actually 132 years ago. Now you celebrate 132 years ago, and I do because I have to go to what Susan said about women. So here's my 30-second commercial about resilient women in Colorado. So 132 years ago, before women had the vote, it was our history, and those of you who've been with me long enough know the story. 2 priests, 2 ministers, a rabbi, and a woman started the United Way 132 years ago. And if you go to our state capitol and you look up in the rotunda, there's 14 stained glass of Colorado pioneers. The only woman is Frances Weisbard Jacobs, who founded the United Way and founded National Jewish Hospital. So when you think about the resiliency that must have taken for a woman 132 years ago who couldn't hold a position on the board once it was founded. And I'm sure, could you imagine the conversation she had with her husband, honey, I'm going to go out and then start something new but I think it speaks to who we are as Coloradans with this idea of what happens when you unite a community together when it needs you the most. And so we take great pride in that. Our mission has never changed in 132 years, which is really that. How do you unite the business community, the public sector, the nonprofit sector together to address the most pressing needs in our community and create opportunity for everybody who calls Colorado home? How we've done that in 132 years these days, and after I have my 2 colleagues, Kayla Garcia and Haley Schultz are in the back row. The 48 hours the 3 of us have had with our business model, we're a little whiplashed today in terms of how quickly things change. But the biggest change for the United Way, and I appreciate you saying we're a business, because oftentimes, if I can make one pitch for the nonprofit sector, nonprofit is a tax status. It is not, doesn't mean you don't operate as a business. We have a responsibility for our donor investors. Our return to investors is in the social capital and the programs. We just don't give you a check to say, here you are, Mr. Stockholder. But if you don't think the nonprofit sector is a business, and then you should talk to Mary Medley, the head of the Colorado Society of CPAs. It is a very big business in Colorado, but we have had to pivot on how we do that for 3 quick reasons. One, the community needs in Denver. How many have lived here more than 5 years? It is not the same. It's not the same city that, let alone the same city that, in the 1960s. So our city and the needs of our city have changed so dramatically in the past 5 years. And so we have to be able to pivot to be able to provide those services to the community members that need us the most. The second thing that has changed dramatically is philanthropy and how philanthropic investments are made. It is a completely different business than it was even 10 years ago on how people make decisions on how they want to support and who they want to support and what they expect that return to be. So how we position and talk about the value of an organization like the United Way, who works on complex root problems that are multi-tiered and not just single-based, is a tough story to tell. And I'd be happy, or Kayla or Haley and I would be happy to talk to you about what the unique role the United Way plays in bringing the community together to address. But philanthropy has changed and donors have changed, and the thing that has most disrupted our business is technology, because you can now on your phone buy a goat in Africa with a push of a button. And that's great. No, I say that sincerely. It is great. But if you're a nonprofit that can't keep up with the technology and you're trying to attract new millennial donors who say, but I could push on my phone and give $25 and immediately see the children that I'm supporting in that village, our whole business has had to change on how we interact, create an experience for people and for donors and investors to understand, invest right here in your own community and buy the goat. But our business model has to be completely, I like goats, by the way, I'm not saying, but. So it is, we have really, our business model changed and continues to change dramatically.
Thank you, thank you. And Rich, if you wouldn't mind taking the mic again, I'd appreciate it, because let's be honest, being in a boom and bust industry, there has been a lot of resiliency over the years, and you've been one of the leaders for a good portion of it. How has your industry changed to be resilient?
Yeah, so, being an avid outdoorsman and an earth scientist and living in Colorado, I love Colorado. I'm an outdoorsman, I'm an environmentalist, but our industry is viewed differently. Our industry is viewed as the source of destroying the environment when it's nothing could be further than the truth, especially in Colorado. So Colorado has driven us to make changes in the way we do business. I think of our company not as an oil and gas company, but as you mentioned, we're an operating company, but we're also a technology company. We're made up of a group of innovators. And the innovation that we're doing here in Colorado is leading edge. I was at an international event and explaining to people in Florence how we operate here in Colorado. And we operate the cleanest barrel of oil and molecule of methane because that's the right thing to do. There is no emissions that come out of our operations. We are concerned about noise, sound, odors, light pollution. So the way we have to operate it is of the highest level. So I actually have worked closely when 181 was put into effect by our legislature and the governor, and I worked through COGA, our trade association, to make sure we had rules in place that ensured that our operations were going to be safe, clean, and a lower footprint.
Will you remind us what 181 is?
So 181, Senate Bill 181 was basically the new law that we operate under oil and gas development here in Colorado. And it's the directive of the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission and how they set the rules, and we have to adhere by those rules.
Good, thank you, thank you. And Bobby, actually, we're gonna stick with the industry just for one more question. First of all, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Because, your committee's faced with scandal right now. How has that impacted the resiliency of, everybody that works with the committee?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and it is, it's not in the past. We're still in the middle of it. But what the organization and what our board did from the very beginning is it was very important for them to immediately commission an investigative study into what went on, how could we have gotten to a place where one of our sport organizations, which aren't really a part of us, if you're not familiar, every sport organizing body is a separate 501c3 from the U.S. Olympic Committee. We do have a certifying obligation and a compliance oversight role that is changing with respect to those sports, but for about a decade, that oversight had intentionally been very loose. So the minute we got into this crisis, this study was conducted, and the key thing and I wasn't there at the beginning of this, but was actually going in for my second interview the day, it's called the Ropes and Grace Study, it's out on our website, links to it, and all our board wanted to know was, what did we know, what did leaders in our organization know about what was going on, and they made a very quick attempt to do a full investigation and then made changes. So we have almost an entirely new leadership team. I was in for my interviews literally, I think it was the day the report was published. And it was like, it just sort of happened that way. They didn't know when it was coming, but you could hear a pin drop walking around the office. It's like a 210-page report. Everybody was scouring it. And what we've tried to do since, from then, and we've had other commission studies been done around what is the best governance model going forward, how can we prevent this from ever happening again, and we're working in partnership with Congress. So this whole theme of transparency is what we've been trying to focus on, having regular communications with our employees. I mean, if you think about it, here are these employees who couldn't be more passionate about the movement and sport and helping athletes to achieve their greatest potential, and then to really question whether they should be a part of an organization that would allow this to happen was just devastating for many of our employees. I'm sure we've had some turnover, but just to piggyback on the theme around donors, when the decision was made for LA to host the 2028 games, our only source of revenue became donor-led. So all of the sponsorship decisions around the Olympics are now being made by the LA 28 organizing committee. So our two sources of revenue ever are sponsorships and donors. And amazingly enough, because we were very transparent and open with our donor community, our donations in 2018 and 19 actually increased. And the commitment and the transparency with which we tried to address our key stakeholders and that we've focused on throughout this process has been appreciated. Certainly when you're in the middle of litigation, you can't be probably as transparent on everything as you want. But I think our stakeholders, and particularly our team members, do appreciate the efforts that we have made to have very open dialogue, have a lot of coffee chat sessions, and especially when you have a whole new leadership team coming in, just getting to know everyone, for people to really decide, is this the organization I want to stay a part of? And thankfully, that passion for the mission has held through, and the appreciation for our communication efforts has been well received. So we're not through yet. There still may be congressional changes that we will be required to comply with, but we are very committed to being very open and moving forward, looking to the future.
Thank you, thank you. And Christine, we're gonna move over to the personal side now, if you don't mind. Uh-oh.
That's not on the paper.
So Christine's very modest. Her background does include, she went to Harvard. Right. Anybody here about that school? Anybody know about Harvard? It's a small little itty bitty school back east, a little bit well known. So she went to Harvard for public policy, and I know there's other things that you've done to help you overcome, really have resilience in your career. Would you mind sharing some of that with us?
You know, I thank you for that, and here's the smartest thing, and I may be jumping ahead in one of the questions I know that you were going to ask, and this is true, and I think it's my definition of resiliency, and I think it's I have been blessed my entire life to surround myself by people who are smarter than I am, and stronger than I am, and know more than I do, and who have been willing to bring me along and hold me up, and that is true to this very day. I work with 100 of the most compassionate, committed, brilliant. I loved what you said about your staff and why it was so devastating to them, because those of us who are lucky enough to be surrounded by people. So all these journeys that I've been lucky enough to have been on are because of other people who were willing to bring me along. I love, and she always sets the bar. I have also been surrounded by a group of amazing women friends who have been willing to open the door from, I'm looking for Patty Fontenot, who's one of them, standing in the back. We have a group of women that you call when you don't know what to do. And there have been extraordinary men in my life that have been willing. I will tell you, and it sounds crazy, but after my very first job, and this is what makes me sound like I'm 110 years old, and I'm not, but my very first job came out of the Boston Globe, remember classified newspaper? That's how you found your job. That's how I found my first job. Every other job has been because somebody has said to me, you should look at this, or you should try this, or you should at least think about this. And oftentimes, including the current job that I have, came from, again, a dear friend of Patty's and mine, who was on the board, called me and said, you should be the CEO of the United Way. And I said, Kaz, you're absolutely crazy. I don't have the skills to do that, because we doubt ourselves too. And she said, what are you talking about? Come in and talk to us. So I think my resiliency has nothing to do with me, other than I have been lucky and blessed to be surrounded again. And I've not been afraid, I think, to ask for help.
Remember I said modesty, right? It's not because she was awesome. It was because other people said she was awesome. But we all know she's awesome. When I work with leaders on resiliency, I often do exactly what Bobby and Christine were talking about. I have them think about who is their support, who not just at work, but at home and in the community as well. So if you haven't done that yet, it's important to sit down on a sheet of paper, write 5 or 6 people who truly are your support system. And you'll be very surprised what you'll see. Another suggestion for that is rate how good your relationship is with them. And then I have them write 1 or 2 things they can do for each person to improve that relationship. So when you need them, they'll be there. So I'm not the expert on this, I'm letting them, but I just can't help myself. I'm so sorry. I just can't help myself. So Rich, your industry, because I do a lot of work in energy sector, and I know sometimes people, they get ashamed sometimes. You know, they sit on a plane and they don't want to tell people that I'm in oil and gas. And as a leader, I would imagine that's kind of hard to hear, right, from those people. So what do you do to build resiliency in your leaders so they don't have that feeling when they're talking to people?
So we're a relatively young, growing company, right? And me as the leader, you know, we recognized, okay, who do we want to be as a company? And I tasked the employees to come together to create what they want the company to be. So that group created our core values.
That's awesome.
And out of those meetings, you know, a big whiteboard with a bunch of descriptions of characteristics came out our core values, which, you know, number 1 starts with stewardship. So it's important that every one of our employees be identified as being a good steward to the communities that we live and work in, and that we do our operations in a way that is respectful. And then also our other core value is teamwork, because everybody recognizes nobody does it alone. And so we want to be made up of a group of excellent people. And then excellence is the other core value, and people and growth. And then recently we added resilience. So that's core values, but it's one thing to put it on a piece of paper, but then it's another thing to get everybody to live by it. And that's what we do week in, week out. And these guys can attest that we maybe get too much into it, but that's what people want to be identified with. You know, our industry is one that takes a lot of heat over negative things, but you know, you couldn't have the lifestyle you have today without our industry. You couldn't create hand cleanser without what we produce. You couldn't make those face masks without what we produce. But you know, that's part of it. It's an amazing chemical that we create a lot of products out that save people in hospitals. Not just what you put in your gasoline tank, but we're also evolving. We're actually moving towards, you know, we're accepting alternative energy. Many of our well sites, we have solar panels that drive the electric equipment. We are doing things with geothermal energy to create clean energy. These are all things that we do because we're a technology and an energy company, and our people want to be part of that.
That is great. And did you hear what he said about he lets the employees are the ones that develop the values? When I work with companies on developing values and leadership competencies, my first thing that I always say is, why are you as the executive team developing these? Yeah, you should be the leaders and you should know what you want the company to be like, but they're not the ones who are actually going to make the company feel like that. So if you are looking at developing your values or your leadership competencies, my suggestion is to go to the people to do that. So kudos to you for doing that. That's wonderful.
Well, it also translates to the bottom line because we have a very low turnover rate because of that.
It's true. Really
And-
good. He deserves a clap for that, don't you guys think? Yeah. Really good. Good. And so Bobby, as the chief people officer, you help obviously create the culture. What have you done to create resiliencies in your leaders?
There's a couple things that we also have embarked on an exercise to establish as part of our new mission, our new vision, our new purpose for the future, our set of core values as well. And like you did, we put together a cross-diagonal team of employees from every level and department in the organization. We spent a decent amount of money to do a really deep dive third-party cultural assessment to really get to the bottom of what people were feeling about where they worked and what their relationship with their direct manager is and could be better. We had in the organization a lot of fear of speaking up, so we felt it was really important to bring in some experts. And as we sort of co-created and developed our core values, we have a set of them that really resonates with a broad swath of our team members. But then we took it a step further to sort of roll those out in conjunction with our new mission statement, we do our strategic planning in quads. Everything is in 4-year increments at the Olympics. So we're rolling out our strategic priorities for the quad. And we packaged all that together so that it wasn't just a core value exercise or a mission exercise. And for the first time, amazingly, ever, we brought every employee to Colorado Springs last week, and we did a whole learning journey, learning map exercise to really embed these core values and the definitions of what they mean and why they're important. It was really impactful, and the day before we brought everyone together, that role of people leader or people manager is so critical in this process. We spent an entire day training around those core values and what the behaviors were expected of all of them. We're rolling out a quarterly performance development process instead of a performance management process. And so this focus around growth and development and quarterly conversations and is really resonating with people. I mean, we're just at the beginning of this journey, but we're going to make sure that our systems support that. We're not only going to have ratings from a manager to an employee, but employees are going to rate their managers on how well they're living the values. And that will be a really key, important part of how we assess, are they the right leader for our organization or not? And we're just really committed to it. So it's super exciting. It all just happened. I'm exhausted.
But
It's really exciting.
Even though you're exhausted, we can still feel your passion.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah. It's not often you get the opportunity to do all of these things at once. Yeah. So, bringing a new leadership team together, really trying to influence intentionally the culture, the environment, having a new, still the same but slightly revised and expanded mission statement at the beginning of a quad. It's just like, this is lucky to have this opportunity. That's what actually attracted me to the role, is all these pieces were coming together at the same time, and we have a CEO who's absolutely fundamentally committed to focusing on this and rebuilding the trust and confidence, not only of our athletes, but of the country.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's exciting.
Thank you. And so, Christine, this last one is actually for you. Your humility is obviously part of your leadership brand and your leadership essence, which is wonderful. But how do you, if you're not feeling resilient, but you have to put on the face of resiliency as your role as a community leader as well as in the organization, how do you do it?
You mean every day? How do I feel? And you tell your team. You absolutely. I'm looking. We've had a 48 hours. You tell your team of that today. I'm not feeling as strong or as confident, or I'm not quite as sure, but I know that collectively as a team we have the answer. So I think it's back to that transparency, and that, and I loved what you also said about loyalty in terms of that. And I think what I've learned as a leader, it's okay to say I don't always know the answer, but I'll figure it out with you. It's okay to say, yeah, I'm kind of tired today, or gosh, I'm not sure. But also the belief, because I really do have it, that we will find the right answer for our organization. We will then find, because it's back to our mission, and I loved your term stewardship, because the people of Colorado and the people we serve trust that we will do that. And so I think it's just being very honest.
Love that. I absolutely love that. And so I want to wrap up the discussion before we open it up to Q&A with one piece of advice you would give people with regards to being resilient. Would you start us off, Christine, since you have the mic?
I think, and we learn it from the people we're privileged to serve, but one piece of advice about being resilient is trust yourself.
That's good.
I think my advice would be really be thoughtful and know what fills you up, because you can't be resilient and there for others if you are drained. And so whether that's something at work or at home or something you do on the side, a passion project, making sure to leave time for that is super important.
Good. Thank you.
I think what I've learned is that there's only one constant out there, and that is change. And you can either embrace it or not. Embrace it.
Easy. All right, and so we're going to open it up now to a few questions. Does anybody have anything you'd like to ask the panelists? Thank you, Patty. This was the Patty we were talking about that was feeding her meter.
So given the coronavirus issues, what's going to happen with the, this is coming, I can see Bobby already nodding. What's going to happen with the Summer Olympics?
I'm not the expert on this, but I'll tell you what this does not represent the views of the United States Olympic Committee. This is Bobby's views. So ultimately, I'm sure there are plenty of probably daily conversations going on between Japan, the IOC, the World Health Organization, and at the end of the day, there has to be a decision made there about postponement, delay, and before a broader group of stakeholders will be weighing in, although I'm sure many people are weighing in right now. So we already, we are planning for these so far in advance. We have our last visit out to Tokyo scheduled for the 23rd of March. We're sending 30 people to do final preparations, make sure the village is set up, the training facilities, all of that. At this point, we don't know whether we're making contingency plans for what if we can't make that trip. So,
Thank you.
So I think, I've been seeing a lot in the press about potential postponement. I'm sure those conversations are going on. I know other cities have offered up their venues from Summer Olympics, but Summer Olympics kind of need to be in the summer because there are certain events that they only work in the summer, like surfing, and so we will all watch and wait and see. So.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Blair.
How do you hire, develop, and train resiliency to those that maybe don't possess that quality in your organization?
I won't speak to hiring. We really focus on it. Really, now what we want to hire for is alignment with all of our core values. So resiliency is a part of that for sure. But the training, we have this great opportunity for our day one orientation, and then we have what we call it training camp. We have all these sports analogies, as you might imagine. And we try to create as many opportunities for our team members to interact with our resident athletes at the training center, which is 1.5 miles away from our headquarters. So having lunch with a para-athlete who's overcome amazing hard knocks in their life and have become these incredible athletes, just having that exposure and experience to interact with them on a daily basis, or if we can create some of those opportunities when we have events and we are bringing in athletes that aren't resident in Colorado Springs, that's another way to really inspire, being your best and overcoming obstacles, because we all have obstacles in work. And what a great learning metaphor that we have, and we try to deliberately take advantage of that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So we have time for one more question. Oh, go ahead, Deb.
So Anna, you made a comment right at the beginning that, we're all stressed. We're all doing a million things and stuff like that. So we're all trying to be resilient all the time. How do you guys deal with resiliency fatigue, right? I work in the oil and gas industry, and with the downturn and 112, and we're going into it again, I'm exhausted, but it's been like 5 years. So I'm really exhausted. And that's one example, but how, you can be resilient for a few months, but how do we do it again and again and again and again?
I would say the way we do it is we celebrate the small wins,
Critical.
right? I mean, we don't have many, but occasionally we do have a small win. I think Susan was talking about, the joint venture we're doing with the Butterfly Pavilion. That's awesome, right? And so we have a program where we identify anyone in the organization that has done something extraordinary, and we make sure everybody knows about it. So I think that's important, to celebrate the small wins.
That's really good. Did you want to say
I
something?
love that.
Christine?
I would. And I think for us, and it goes to the hiring and the retention, and it's back to the mission that that we are lucky enough to serve in. And we run a 211 call center, and you dial 211 when you can't feed your kids tonight or you don't have a safe place to sleep. And we get tired. We get very tired. But what we do is we walk downstairs and we take one of those phone calls ourselves personally and hear who's on the other end. And I think, yeah, I'm not so tired.
That's awesome.
I'm not so tired, and I don't have to do it by myself.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. So I'm sure you heard lots of common themes here. And I want to hit upon what Rich just said, and then, of course, what Christine said. And Rich was talking about celebrating small wins. And the reason I'm coming back to that is because I heard a lot of, kind of groans in there. This is something you can take back to your organization. Too many times we wait until the end of a project or the end, or when something gets pushed out into the market. It's absolutely critical with your teams to celebrate every single milestone, as small as it is. And that doesn't mean let's go have lunch. Okay, great, now get your ass back to work. Oh, I cussed. Amy, you got me. Amy said I would cuss, and I'm like, no, I won't. I did it, thank you. It really is celebrating them throughout the whole project, really important. And then with Christine, gosh, you gotta get connected. Get back connected to what is the purpose of the business. I don't know about you, but I have found this panel so inspiring. Absolutely. Before you guys clap, hold on, because you have to clap for the people that I'm gonna thank as well. First of all, Association of Corporate Counsel. We have some representation back there. I want to thank them for supporting this. So they were kind and they realized the importance of the topic, so they opened it up to their members as well. We sold out, as you guys who tried to register know, we only opened up seats because people who were supposed to travel to come in all of a sudden couldn't. So some of you really benefited from that, which is wonderful. I'm glad you're here. I also want to thank, of course, Amanda and a half. I have a wonderful advisory board, and they really help put this together. As they know, I'm kind of a shit show at times, so another cuss, kind of. And so I know. Executive presence, I'm all about executive presence. So I want to thank them for getting my back. Okay, all right. Okay, well, you know, I mean, in front of everybody that'll embarrass me? Oh, God. So I wanted to thank, I have to look on here, of course, which is bad. Oh, of course, Evan Strauss in the back is our greeter. And where's my BFF, my best fashion friend, who's also a greeter, is right there. Where's Rachel? Rachel LaForte right there. She was a greeter as well, and she also dresses me. Otherwise, I'd look like a lawyer and not very good one at that. And of course, we have Mr. Kenny Lee Young in the back, who provided music again. I'm going to do a plug. He is awesome at corporate events. So if you need somebody I'd always encourage that. And Amy, did you want to say something?
Actually, Amanda and I want to come up and say a few things. Little impromptu for you. First of all, how many of you enjoyed this today? I know. It's such a unique opportunity, and thank you all so much. I mean, to share your stories like this, personal and professional, it's really a unique opportunity, and you were very generous, so thank you very much. There's a few shout-outs that we want to give because we're talking about resiliency today, and it comes in, I think we all kind of learned, it comes in a lot of different ways. It looks different, it's personal, it's professional, it can be profound. How many of you watch 60 Minutes? Come on, be honest. 60 Minutes on Sunday? How many of you watched it this past Sunday and saw the thing about the Bahamas? Thank you. I'd like to give a shout out to my friend and my partner and my client, Misty Burns, in the back. She is with Rocky Mountain Institute, and that is actually the company that was helping the Bahamas rebuild their infrastructure after that terrible hurricane, help them rethink, restructure, so that they are resilient and don't go through the same things they went through before. And so what a gem in our community. And it just shows, again, our community in Colorado, how special it is, how unique it is, and how not only are we rebuilding our own community again and again, but we reach out and we're generous to others as well. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to you guys. Yes, absolutely. And this one's a little bit harder for us to talk about because it's very personal. I'm going to give a shout out to our friend Evan, our greeter. So for those of you who do not know, Evan, come over here so people can see your beautiful face. So for those of you who don't know Evan actually works for Mercer. He's a consultant on our health and welfare team. He's a friend of mine. He helps Amanda and I with HR Unlocked. He's helped us with a million initiatives. He's also a veteran. He's a wounded warrior. He is a Purple Heart recipient. And yes. And again, this is really hard because he's a dear friend of mine, but he's also incredibly resilient. And what he did with his resilience is he, along with 3 other veterans, rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. While we were all celebrating our Christmases and our New Year's, he was out in the middle of the ocean, literally in a rowboat. The reason he was doing this was to raise awareness around the mental health issues that affect so many of our veterans. Yep. And so he just got back. He was out there for 50 days and 11 hours and 35 minutes. And he did set 2 world records in his boat. And what I want to point out about this is he never saw another person besides the 3 people that were in his boat. He did meet some lovely dolphin friends and some beautiful whales. But he is back. He is thinner, for sure. If you need anything lifted with arms, he's your guy because he rowed a boat across the ocean. But just resilience looks different for a lot of people, and I just want to welcome you home and thank you for helping out with this event. And we're just so pleased to have you here. Yeah. So, closing out the event, stay. We still have a fabulous bar open. Thank you to our bar team. You are lovely. We have food coming around, so please stay and keep your eye out for our next event. We'll be sending out information soon.